Yeah.
Okay, welcome everybody. Looks like we have a good discussion potential here tonight on education. I'm Susan Gore. I got Wyoming Liberty Group started about 6 years ago, and I'm very glad that you are coming to join us with our concern about education. Amy, I don't think you've ever been introduced this way, but she's sort of the junkyard dog of education. And she gets her facts right. She pins it down. She knows more. She's more informed than anybody who's on the other side. And she's diplomatic, and she's to the point. And she's been a legislator for 3 terms, and she's joined us here at Wyoming Liberty Group, and we're very happy to have her. So go ahead, Amy, and tell them about education.
Thank you, Susan. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We wanted to try something a little different. So we just finished the legislative season, and here at the Wyoming Liberty Group we work a lot on policy. And policy is really important. It's important to all of us, but we can oftentimes get lost in sort of the sterile debate over statutes and legislation and policy. What we really wanted to do is take an opportunity to maybe take a breath and talk about what does policy really mean? Because it actually means something. As you all know, it actually means something in your lives every day. So looking at education, what does the Common Core really mean for children? What is it going to mean in their lives today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if it stays, if it becomes a fact and we have it? So we really wanted to sort of take a look at that and sort of discuss what it means. And we want to give you some tools and really have an open discussion tonight. So really, tonight's program is going to be as good as you all make it. So please, when we're ready to have discussion, feel free to join in. And generally, the crowd here at the Wyoming Liberty Group is not shy. So I'm guessing that you all are not going to be shy. We have a couple of tools that we're going to use tonight. I'm going to read from, this is an excellent book. We have a couple copies available for a slight donation, and I really encourage you to pick one up. You can have this copy as well when I'm done. This is Terrence Moore's The Story Killers. Terrence Moore is a professor at Hillsdale University, and he is a fabulous writer. This is a really good book, just talking about the common sense case against the Common Core and what the Common Core does to English language arts. Please come on in and grab, if you need 2 seats, we can find 2 for you. There you go. Come on in. So I'm going to read from this. We're also going to be highlighting this evening a film that came out yesterday. And I don't know if any of you have had a chance to see it yet, but it's the Homeschool Defense League Association, HSLDA's movie called Building the Machine. It's a great movie just talking about the Common Core, the history and what it really means, and we're going to have a few excerpts. So I'm going to wait a second here. I'm going to start the evening off right with a really quick reading from this book. What will be the results of this educational regime, the Common Core? 2 byproducts of this form of schooling we already see in America today. First, young people who are not armed with the great stories of literature and history will have their views of goodness and happiness formed by the false stories produced by the myth makers in Hollywood and other parts of our popular culture. Just consider the view of sex and the relations between the sexes promulgated in the movies. Second, the American people will know little about the forms of self-government the Founding Fathers created to secure our freedom and security and to allow us to pursue and attain happiness. Ill-versed in the ideas and habits of self-rule, we shall look increasingly to a supposedly benevolent, omnicompetent, and all-providing state run by an unknown and wholly unaccountable bureaucracy of experts. We've seen that a lot with the Common Core. Parents who do not follow politics will wonder what such designs have to do with the schooling of their children. What they may not understand is the extent to which those in charge of the Common Core regard the nation's children as belonging far less to their parents and far more to a vague entity called society. And that society cannot be left to itself as individuals working out their own greatest happiness without doing harm to others. Rather, it must be directed or programmed with all the latest ideas and fads. That, I think, really strikes at the heart of the issues around the Common Core, particularly the English language arts standards, and this idea that we're giving away and we're not reading and learning from the great stories that we all grew up on, the great stories that form us as people and have us understand what it means to be human beings, how we relate to each other. He goes on to say, the reason the stories that were once read in this country come into play is the old adage, the best defense is a good offense. The offense of truth has always been a telling of great stories, stories that show men and women at their best, or alternatively, the ends we come to when we pursue our worst inclinations. Without stories of the good, human beings do not know what the good is. Without stories where the good guy is the hero, young people have no one to root for and nothing to believe in. So we wanted to talk tonight just about this idea of the Common Core from both the English language arts and the math. And we had a math quote up there, Manny. Just pull it up real quick, and I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at this. If you follow social media, you're going to see a lot of different Common Core math problems. We have folks on our staff that have children in school, and they love to talk about the different math questions. And here's just one example. Mike saw 17 blue cards, 25 green cards at the toy store. How many cards did he see? Write a number sentence with a box for the missing number. Explain how the number sentence shows the problems. This is part of the fuzzy math from grade K to grade 3 that you're basically seeing. There must be some mothers in the audience. Yes, where they're not teaching children the standard algorithm. 12 over 22 with the plus sign, and then we learn how to carry, and that's a standard algorithm. That's not what you're getting with Common Core. You're getting this complicated, frustrating, fuzzy math, new math idea. So here's what one little boy put. Here was his example. He had to explain how he got it. I got the answer by talking in my brain, and I do of the answer that my brain got. That's how he's explaining how he got the math. Because really, obviously, he doesn't know. So for the parents here, anybody want to give us some thoughts about what you're seeing in the classroom, what's frustrating to you, sort of what you know is happening with your children every day?
This isn't education. This is an attempt to abolish mathematics. This is deliberate. There's no other way that this could be explained. These people are out to destroy our minds.
Yeah. Well, I think we wanted to sort of, this was a handout if you all picked it up, and we really wanted to use this as well. It has some more quotes, and I think, Brad, you just brought up a great point. Point A of this, the Common Core movement is an arm of the culture war. It separates us from our home culture and supplants our family life with temporal, unstable ideas based on fads, rigid ideology, and lukewarm expectations. And I think that's absolutely it. And when we talk about supplants our family and really separates us, you speak to the math standards, because as a mother, and what I've heard from mothers all over the state is when your child comes home and you don't even understand the math, it's telling your child, Mom can't help me. Mom doesn't understand how to do this. My teacher at school does, but Mom doesn't. And that really is part of supplanting the family life and separating the child from the mother. Because Mom can't and Dad can't explain the math homework. They're both, I have no idea. So I think it is really part of the culture. It's not so much about education, is it? It really is about doing these things.
Let me just add one thing too, Amy, if I may. Mathematics is deductive logic. Okay, it is conceptual as it gets.
Right.
The two things that kids have problems with today in the school system are reading and mathematics, and they're both conceptual apprehensions that have to take place. You cannot teach this stuff on a perceptual level. I enjoyed mathematics greatly when I was a kid. It was fun to learn, and if it's done in the context of its history, how it was developed, you can learn it for life, and you can learn it in a couple of years. The fact that some fifth grader is having to wade his way through this, it's destructive.
Yes.
And after enough of that destruction, you can't help but think it's deliberate.
Yes. One more comment.
If I was in school and I had this problem presented to me, I'd say a couple things. How many cars did he see? I'd say there's insufficient information. You know how many blue cars he saw and how many green cars. You don't know how many red cars, how many orange cars.
Good point. Very good.
And it says, explain how the number sentence shows the problem. The number sentence that they want you to come up with doesn't show the problem. It shows the solution.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think, Brad, you've hit on something, too, that I wanted to highlight, so we'll cue up the video. There's something else about the Common Core, and I've taken 3 clips from the movie Building the Machine, which I highly recommend to all of you. If you have a chance, it's about 40 minutes, 39 minutes, and it's really worth watching it. Like I said, it debuted yesterday, and it is a great movie. And it's really talking about this idea of, first of all, the Common Core came to the schools through English language arts and math, those two subjects. And it's interesting to ask the question, why did they pick English language arts and math? Well, in this country, those two subjects are the subjects that are the most highly remediated at the university level, at the college level. So in Wyoming, about 50% of our students need remediation in math and in English. And that's a nationwide issue. So I want to cue up this clip, Mandy, and we'll let them hear it.
So why wouldn't we want to at least raise the standards for 90% of the states, and then maybe down the road, in a few years, we can do something else that even furthers that improvement?
How much time do you think we have? I don't know. It's hard for me to estimate. I was thinking initially when I started in on this weird odyssey into education, I was thinking, I know there's a catastrophe coming on the horizon.
This is not your ordinary run-of-the-mill recession. We are going through the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression.
But I also was pretty confident that it was going to be after I was gone. Not anymore. Hidden under the table in the request for proposals for the race to the top money, that $4.5 billion the government is using as seed money to encourage the adoption of Common Core, is a series of requirements that in order to apply for this money, the presidents of the public universities in each state that applies have to sign a letter agreeing that if a student comes to the university or college, as the case may be, from high school, having passed a standardized exam in the content of the basic course Algebra 2, it is not permitted in this, specifically not permitted, to put them in remedial courses.
Everything will align private schools, including charter schools, because they want to get their kids to college. Suddenly, it used to be that ACT could do what the colleges demanded from it. Suddenly, now ACT is going to do, it's actually done already, what the K-12 system demands of it. Same with SAT.
Currently today, over 40% of the students in this country have to take remedial courses in mathematics. And what they're saying in effect is that we can't remediate. We have to give them credit-bearing courses. The long-term effect of that is simply that the credit-bearing courses will drop in content to the point where they fit to what we're getting out of K-12. And that's a severe, what the educators call dumbing down of a system that is the only system that is giving us the long-term economic support that we require.
Is this idea about why did they choose English language arts and math? I mean, it's interesting that those were the first, because the idea of national standards is not new in this country. Under Bill Clinton in the 90s, he had this idea of having a national set of standards. He chose history as where he wanted to go first. Well, if you think math and English language arts are controversial, history is extremely controversial. So in his piece of legislation, Goals 2000, which is a national piece of legislation that passed, he wanted to try to have states volunteer for these history standards. And it created a huge uproar. People were not interested, states were not interested. So this time around, we got English language arts and we got math. Well, English language arts and math are the two areas, first of all, that we test for. They're two of the most important areas we test for because they're really the most foundational parts of it, your education, writing, and math. It's also the two that are the highest at remediation. What Dr. Milgram is talking about in this clip is the fact that what the Common Core is, and I like to call it this, is it's really just a giant cheat. It's the idea that we are going to remove remediation. We're going to eliminate it. But here's the thing. We're not going to eliminate remediation because we've made children capable of passing a freshman math class. We're going to remove remediation because the states that have signed on to the Common Core, which are college and career ready, they are certified as college and career ready. Not based on any kind of research. This is all a giant experiment. These folks who created these standards by fiat are saying they're college and career ready. So by fiat, they're college and career ready. Therefore, the universities and the community colleges who accept Wyoming children with Wyoming diplomas cannot remediate them. They have to accept them as they are, as being college and career ready standards. And so what Dr. Milgram is saying in this clip also is that he's saying that, and he's also saying, so what does that mean for our universities? What does that mean for kids in schools and for their professional life as adults? What is it going to mean for them? Well, it means that we're dumbing down not just our K through 12 system, but our university systems. So that's what it means. You're skeptical. You're sarcastic is what you are, yes. And that's exactly it. And that's one of the many sort of insidious things about the Common Core that no one wants to talk about. That even through federal grants, we're seeing federal grants to our universities that are saying, you college president, if you accept this money, you have to accept college and career ready standard students, and you cannot remediate them. So we're going to remove remediation.
Can I just say that again? Because what Brad is saying, they're messing up the kids' brains. So the kids can't learn. And they're dumbing them down at the elementary school, the high school level.
Yep.
So that by the time, and then they're giving it the name college and career ready.
Right.
And then they're saying that these dumbed down kids, still they're forcing them on the schools, whatever school they go on to, and making the schools dumb down to the kids. So they're dumbing down the whole system and really messing up the learning process in the entire system. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. The idea of the Common Core, that's exactly it.
Well,
Right.
if you have students of deficient quality educationally coming into the college system, and the college system would normally remediate those students to bring them up to college level.
Right.
If you want to kill remediation, you either are going to have classrooms filled with people that are literally unable to follow the lessons, or you're going to have to dumb down what they're experiencing to meet the level of where they came from, correct?
Exactly. And that's the point Dr. Milgram is making. As a Stanford professor, he's making that point. That ultimately, we're not going to remove remediation in that, yay, we won, and not 50% of our children need to be remediated, but simply it's a cheat. It's a cheat on paper. Go ahead. Oh, grab the mic for us.
Thanks. Isn't that all in the name of fairness, that everybody is supposed to be equal?
Yes, so you bring up another point, and Dr. Stotsky speaks a lot about this. You know, she and Dr. Milgram were involved in the validation committee, and there are things that they actually cannot say to us because they were required to sign a confidentiality agreement when they sat on the validation committee. But one of the ideas of the Common Core standards was that we were going to bring our lowest performing students up. But it's up so that everybody meets in the middle. It's not up so that, you'll hear bureaucrats, we've heard people in Wyoming who support the Common Core say, this is not the floor, this is not the ceiling, it's the floor. We can go higher. We can, your schools can do more, your districts can have more, they can do more. Well, folks, the reality of public education and our K through 12 system is that they're going to do only what they need to do to get the scores passed, to get their funds. They're overwhelmed with all kinds of other things. Dr. Haynes.
This isn't new. When I was on the board of trustees at the university, we saw this come in a different way. They started with student evaluation of professors, but it wasn't a critical evaluation. It was whether or not they liked a professor. And one night, I didn't know how bad it was. I went to dinner in Laramie because it's a quiet place, I thought.
Right.
Half of the math and language professors were at this restaurant, and they descended on me like bees. And their complaint was, a large share of Wyoming high school graduates could not do freshman math and freshman language. And one teacher said, how am I going to teach them German?
Yeah.
I'm teaching them English. And I says, well, if they can't, then you have to flunk them. Oh, my word. Talk about gas on the fire. If we flunk them, we're in trouble. So this mindset has already been laid insidiously. Yeah. And so we're going to have to pull this thing out by its roots. And we're also going to have to chop down trees and burn it. We really have to cut this thing off at the pass. Really appreciate your work, Amy.
So, thank you, Dr. Haynes, you brought up a great point about the basically, essentially just trying to create this equality, the sense that everybody is going to be the same. That is what the Common Core is. The title of this film is Building the Machine. And what they mean by that is that the architects of the Common Core really believe that in creating a child and educating a child, they're building a machine. And every machine is going to look the same. They're all going to be college and career ready. They're all going to be at the same level.
I had about an hour phone conversation with David Coleman. He asked to talk to me about the Common Core, and I was happy to listen to him. And there were some ideas in there that if I was running a public school system, I would think were basically a good idea. But what I did say to him is that the difference between his approach to education and my approach to education is he thinks he has some good ideas about how to do education. And I think in the homeschooling world, I have some good ideas about how to do education. The difference is he's trying to use the force of law to require everybody to implement his good ideas.
The central planning is simply people who like power, who think they're an elite who knows how to run other people's lives. And I grew up differently. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts that had an open town meeting, and I loved it. The idea that you have independent citizens who choose for themselves how to govern themselves. That was Lincoln's idea. That was what he was fighting for. How to make sure that self-government as a concept endured because the Union had to endure. That was what was the great idea that came out of the Constitution and that Lincoln was impressed by. It was the first country that was really based on that premise, that people were capable of governing themselves. They didn't need a monarch. They didn't need a dictator. They didn't need central planners. It's a hugely powerful idea. And we've almost lost sight of it.
To have one standard for all is a total dead end, and it's also stereotyping people that everybody will go to college and everybody wants the same kind of career and everybody has the same abilities and interests, and you're not worthwhile if you don't do this. This is crazy.
If you have a lot of local control, people can experiment, try out, and to see which one is better. So this whole concept of laboratories of democracy, laboratories of education, you basically stifle this. But then there is a second aspect, which has to do with whose child is it? Is it the government right to teach the child what the government thinks the child should know? Or is it my child and I should have some say in it?
My real concern, I know this sounds trite, it's been said so many ways, is that McGraw-Hill, Pearson, Gates really regard education as a production line in which they're going to take little human beings and make them college or career ready. Come on now, they're human beings. There's more than college and career.
Well, I think the purpose of education is for a person to discover what they're talented at, to discover who they are, to grow it as an individual and as someone who can think, to create someone who's articulate, someone who can be a lifelong learner, someone who can be successful in life. And that means communicating, it means learning, it means passion, being passionate about what you've decided to do and discovering what you've decided to do. I think current policymakers, unfortunately, see the purpose of education as being training people to acquire the minimum level of skills that are required to work in a technical workplace.
To compete in a world that's incredibly competitive, where people are very aggressive in seeking competitive advantages, we have to play this game as well and win.
But identifying common standards is just the starting point. We'll only know if this effort has succeeded when the curriculum and tests are aligned to these standards.
They have to teach to the standards or the kids won't get the right scores. And the right scores is not the point here. They're trying to quantify everything, and this will make it all right. We'll be a brilliant nation. No, we'll be a nation where nobody's brilliant. Every person has a different talent, a different ability, different interest. These are living, breathing people. Every prominent person in this nation, in politics, in government, in entertainment, in law, followed a passion and was brilliant for something. They weren't all mushed out to be the same. And once again, some of the most famous, richest people in this country were terrible students with terrible test scores who struggled through school. But that wasn't the be-all and the end-all of their lives or their judgments about them.
So what do you think?
My take on Common Core that I see going on with this is the fact that we get the students dumbed down, we get them in a position where they're not able to think or analyze for themselves, and then they depend on government officials to do that for them.
Yeah, and that's essentially what Sanders is talking about. Dr. Stotsky. Oh no, you got it. Go.
Historically, back in the dark ages when I was in K through 12 school, how was the curriculum determined? And the answer might be different up through about grade 6, because at grade 7 is kind of when the textbooks take over, and the determination of the curriculum is just how the decision is made what textbooks to use. And in the lower grades, it seemed like it was more of an art. The teachers practiced an art and didn't really have things spelled out. It wasn't regulated. What's your take on the historical perspective?
Well, the idea of standard and standard setting and really sort of curriculum development and setting really is fairly new. So if you go just look at Wyoming statutes, and last summer I did a little research in the law library. Wyoming statutorily didn't even require set standards until about 1917. And when we did, it was something very vague. At the same time, the legislature had created the State Board of Education, and it was something very vague, that just the districts needed to create some standards. And here are a couple areas. And it was all driven at the local district. It was basically, all that work was driven at the local district. You local districts set some standards. In '97, Wyoming changed all that. And that was during the period that I was discussing, the Goals 2000 Clinton era, when suddenly standards-based reform was the new silver bullet that was going to create nirvana in education. Standards were going to be the ticket to get that done. So in '97, Wyoming changed its statutes and put in these 9 content areas, got very much more state top-heavy, saying that the State Board of Education would create these standards and then the districts would follow through. Before '97, it was very much locally controlled.
Would that be the superintendent of the school district?
And your school board, your elected school board. Yeah. So that's the difference. Oh.
I just want to touch upon a few views I have. And this is rather a broad view. Doesn't have a lot to do with the nuts and bolts of what you're discussing, but probably most of you know about the Cloward-Piven strategy. Francis Piven was very active in the last, what was it, against Wall Street, I even forget the name, but the melee in against bankers and against the 1% and those. Well, anyway, the strategy is to overwhelm the system. In order to make a change, you have to first tear it down. And another thought that comes to mind is of Antonio Gramsci, who was in the early part of the last century. He was a Marxist, and he realized that we weren't going to move to Marxism through revolution. So he began the principle of undermining different institutions, the media, the schools, the churches, the family, the structures that make a society. And in order to gradually bring about change, and that's so evident in everyday news, I see this as the same principles working on the individual, kind of the individual is a microcosm of the society. and they're tearing down the capacities of the individuals to think for themselves, to make educated choices. I'll leave it at that. I know that's a broad view, but that's how I see it.
No, thank you so much for your comments. I mean, and you could not have encapsulated better sort of what's important for us here at the Wyoming Liberty Group, this idea that the individual is, an individual human being with the abilities to make these decisions. I mean, our tagline is, choose to be informed. Am I saying that right?
Volunteer to be informed.
Volunteer to be informed. Then you're all here because you volunteered to come tonight and be informed. And that's so profoundly important. I want to go real quick to, and then we'll take more comments, to B, schooling children in random bits of information and technology without a context of reason and accountability for good character leave children without the skills to adapt to a reasonable and productive life. The Common Core attempts to strip families of their natural inclination to care for one another. Common Core consumes family time with nonsensical, irrelevant homework and pressures parents to comply with the misinformation on which the Common Core is based. And this again strikes at this idea that the Common Core really is trying to, and it is succeeding in stripping away that connection between parents and their children. And I can't say that enough. I mean, we say that repeatedly, and we're just going to keep saying it because we've got moms here tonight, and I talk to moms from all over the state. And the story is literally the same. It's not different. That's the story. That's what we hear. I can't figure this out. The teacher knows all. I can't help my child. It sets up that barrier.
I don't tell my child teacher knows all. Sorry, I tell him the teacher's an idiot for teaching.
Good for you. Good for you.
I took a lot of time a few years ago to study how our educational system came to be in the United States of America, and unbeknownst to most people, the American system of education was adopted on the lines of the Prussian model, and it was brought over here by Horace Mann of Massachusetts back in the 1830s. And the whole entire approach of the Prussian model of education was instantaneous inculcation of obedience without questioning authority, right down to the bells ringing every hour and the students shuffling en masse through the hallways. The whole entire thing is geared toward indoctrination instead of education. And the Common Core that we're seeing today is the federal attempt to complete the job that the state started well over 100 years ago. And they just want one neck ready for one leash.
Well, that's very good. And I have to say to you all, because we're going to go to the next segue, I have not paid Brad. He didn't know what I was going to say next, but he keeps giving me the perfect intros for the next segment. So we're going to go to the next segment real quick.
This is a highly diverse nation. We have people growing up in the heart of big cities, people who will never be in a big city, people on farms, people on reservations, people whose whole lives will be spent in agriculture, people who really don't want to go to college, people who don't need to go to college. We have kids who come to school at the age of 4.5 or 5, never having seen an orange or a rabbit. They really don't know their own names, and their childhoods have been total tumult. And the waffle plate is being put over them, and they're supposed to learn. I especially love the fact that districts, mine included in St. Louis, are being punished because the kids don't come in and keep up. And a friend of mine as a teacher said, I don't get it. If they're all getting the same lessons, why aren't they all making the top standardized scores? No matter what their childhoods were. I couldn't answer. I was so dumbfounded. Because they're not apples, they're people. They're not going to not know how to focus, half the vocabulary, how to respond to an adult, ever being addressed directly, ever having a meaningful conversation. They're scared, and you're worried about your test standards.
that's the end, and I wanted to show that particular clip because I thought it really highlighted what we're talking about here and what you're going to hear us and what we talk about a lot, what we really want to highlight. This idea that the number one outcome for children is parental involvement. And the most insidious thing about the Common Core is it really tries to break that. The mom first, and then...
I just wanted to say my oldest is 20 years old. I've had my children in 3 different districts in 2 different states. 2 of the districts are here in Wyoming. I can say from the time she hit kindergarten to the time now, as a parent, they don't want us in those schools. I went from when she was in kindergarten, I went from spending 4 hours a day in the school. My philosophy was always, let me help you with this stuff so you can teach the child. They don't want parents in there to make photocopies. They don't want parents in there. They do not want us in there at all. And that makes me want in there even more.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was 2010 when I started to really get into politics for myself and wanted to get involved in the legislature. And I would talk to my sister about education. She lives in Illinois, and she's a teacher. And we would just talk for hours on the phone about education. And she says, you know, teaching is a 3-legged stool. You have the teacher, the parent, and the child. And she just would drill this into me over and over and over. And just, she teaches 8th grade biology. And just like maybe 5 months ago, with this Common Core coming on, she says, well, I'm getting involved in the science standards and the math. And I said, great. I said, did you have parents involved when you did this? Her answer was, why would we want to do that? And it blew my mind in just a few months or years how my sister's thoughts have changed. Like you said, the parents, they don't want them there, and it's sad.
Well, and anymore, they truly... How many teachers do we know do not have their children in a public school? I know out of all of the teachers that I am friends and family with, I could probably name maybe 3 whose children go to a public school and are not private or homeschooled. That says a lot when they don't want to submit their own children to this. Why should we?
Yep, good.
One more comment, because we're on the same wavelength here. My brother-in-law teaches 10th grade science, and very liberal, very against homeschooling, told me 3 weeks ago, I'm not teaching anymore. I'm giving it up. If I had children, they would be homeschooled. And it just blew me away.
I just want to say, I'm just a simple soul here, but we all need to go back and look up the 45 goals of communism, because don't laugh, that has not gone away. It's just changed its uniform / costume, whatever you want to call it. But I believe it's rule number 16 or 17 that says get control of the schools. And this is one way of how they're doing it. They're starting from the college level on down by saying we have to do this, we have to change course of study, and blah, blah, blah. And like the mom and Lynn have said back here, they don't want parental involvement. They want to indoctrinate / brainwash the children, so they'll have automations that they can dictate to, and we're letting them get away with it because they're dangling great big bags of money in front of our legislators, and these people are going to say, sure, bring it on down. So that's my rant on it, and I believe it's fairly accurate. We just need to wake up.
Well, here's what we like to say at the Wyoming Liberty Group, and this is what we want to say to you all. First of all, I agree with you, but here's what we want. First of all, we're so glad that you're all here tonight. We want them to be thinking, oh no, the Wyoming Liberty Group is doing another event on the Common Core. They're educating more people are showing up, they're donating, they're getting out there, they're involved in elections. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do about this? That's the response to that. We understand. We understand. I mean, you watch the film, you've parents in schools. How do we counter that? Well, we counter that by showing up, getting involved, being informed, and taking action. And we want to get in their headspace. We want to have them thinking, oh no, here they go again. We're in trouble. There's another group. Dr. Haynes?
Well, we can kind of close the loop. You remember when the Führer Obama was elected, and he said American exceptionalism was done. What he meant was exactly what you guys are talking about, and that's centralized planning. And this is kind of the linchpin between the education system, healthcare, and trust me, folks, they've got a real chokehold on the food supply. They've starved out millions of acres in California, which used to produce most of our produce year-round and all of our winter produce for this part of the world. And it's mostly imported. So that's not by accident. So what you just said, Amy, about us staying involved, well, we will, and there are more and more people involved. Now, the teachers are pawns in this system. They are not drivers. They are foot soldiers without knowing it. And here's how it happens to them. They're in a system where they come out of school with a job and a family and debt, A, B, C, now they got a job. They just want to keep their job. They're told what to do. Many of them are in their early 20s, and they just do what they need to do to keep their job. And parents coming in wanting their kids to be taught, wanting their kids to be mentored, which is how we all grew up in school, are just a problem. So the thing we have to do is stop this thing, but we also have to put in a system where teachers can teach. I was mentored by my teachers and nurtured to some degree, but mentored and pointed in the right direction over and over again. Some of us were allowed to work ahead, and other kids needed more help. Teachers don't have that luxury now. That's where this cookie cutter thing comes from. So we got to fix the system that they work in, and then we can demand that they teach.
No, I would agree completely. Another book that I'm reading right now, Smart Kids of the World and How They Got That Way. It's a really interesting book. And it's from the perspective of a journalist who went around the world for a year and looked at countries that are succeeding. And she talks a lot about the idea of teachers. Dr. Stotsky, we've had the great pleasure of bringing her here a couple times, and so I've gotten a lot of windshield time with her, which I'm so happy to have gotten. She's a wonderful lady. And she talks about what are some of the really simple things that this country could do very quickly, and one of them is our teachers' colleges. In Finland, when you go to teachers' college, it's like trying to get into med school here. I mean, it is difficult. They want the cream of the crop. They want the top people of their country. And then they pay them like rock stars, and they treat them like rock stars. They know that these people who are educating their children have one of the most important jobs in their country. And so Dr. Stotsky talks about take a look at our teachers' colleges. Take a look at the rigor, the excellence that needs to be in our teachers' colleges.
Does the Wyoming Liberty Group understand that the ultimate answer is a privately run school system? And I know that you guys are policy people, and that you kind of have to drag the masses along kicking and screaming, and you don't want to slap them upside the head too fast with actual reality, because then they're just going to go, oh my God, well, they're radicals! But I'm kind of curious what your ultimate goals are in that.
Brad, hand the microphone to the heart and soul of the Liberty Group, Susan Gore, and I'm going to let her answer that question.
We didn't even touch education because of my stand that education shouldn't be public. But the pressure's on, and kids are getting ruined, so we had to do something. So what we're trying to do is two things. Well, first of all, get out the message, but this, obviously, people here got the message. so that we appreciate that. We have a sophisticated group here. The first thing is we'd like to have, for the public school system, we'd like to have a Wyoming constructed curriculum. And that's not hard to do. There's things off the shelf we can pull out, we can put it together in a year's time, really, if we got the go-ahead. So that at least we have our own stories. We have here, without stories of the good, human beings do not know what good is. We have to have stories of the good, and of course, the bad, your mistakes you can make to contrast those things. And the second thing we want to do is have escape routes from the public system. And so there are lots of things happening nationally in that regard. We'd like to, certainly homeschooling is being left alone, but right now it's under truancy law in the state of Wyoming. We'd like to change that and assert parental authority in our statutes. We'd like to have multifamily homeschooling so parents can get together and cooperate. We'd like to then go ahead. Amy, why don't you go ahead and list the things? There are lots of things that can be done. Why don't you go ahead and enumerate?
Yeah, and she's hit some of the really, really good ones, and I think the most urgent ones, because we're going to, from a policy perspective, we definitely want to hit the low-hanging fruit first. I mean, that's the most important thing, is to get the things that we know that we can get, and Representative Hutchings understands that. And then we get into the big stuff. Outside of homeschooling and private schooling and deregulating private school, then we get into the big things like opportunity scholarships, or how do we let parents leave with their feet and take the money they've invested in the public school system as taxpayers with them. So how do we do that? I mean, and those are big questions. We're going to hit the low-hanging fruit first and then get into the big question. And we'd love to hear other people's thoughts, comments. Mike?
Amy, you and I came from the same place. You came from Johnson County, Kansas. I just moved from Johnson County, Kansas. I've had a jillion thoughts as I've listened tonight to folks here, and I can tell you that you are dead on. But I'm also telling you that from my political career in Kansas, and when I say political career, I'm talking about electing rock-solid conservative people who want nothing to do with Common Core, who are family values-based legislators and or homeschooler type people. What you're fighting is the teachers union. And that is probably singularly the most powerful union in the country right now, because the traditional unions like the machinists, the UAW, the Teamsters, their numbers are going way, way down. But the teachers union, and every one of those teachers is drinking the Kool-Aid, and that's why the three-legged stool is no longer part of the deal. Those teachers have drunk the Kool-Aid. They have their union dues deducted from their paycheck. The school board writes the check to the union once a month. And those folks are all of the folks, those teachers and those teachers' unions, who are against every single one of the comments that were made tonight in this room.
Well, Mike, that's the political reality in Kansas. We're a little lucky here in Wyoming right now, because that isn't quite the political route. Thankfully, right now, teachers' dues to teachers' unions do not automatically deduct. They have to sign up and they have to send the dues in. Right, so we're lucky in the sense that we don't have sort of that really powerful muscle that I know exactly what you're talking about in Kansas and in other states. The reality of the teachers union in Wyoming is really, really interesting. The teachers union offers a vision plan. If you can believe this, they get their health insurance through the district and their dental insurance, but what they don't have is a vision plan. Teachers union offers a vision plan. And so lots of teachers sign up to the teachers union to get the $5 vision plan. Yeah, so exactly. So yeah, so we have a little different look here in Wyoming. Okay, whoever you want to go. Yeah, you all work it out. Who wants to talk next?
Yeah, you're right, Amy. I was just going to bring up the difference between right-to-work states and not right-to-work states, and the fact that the real issue here is the bureaucracy was created by the law in the late 1990s that created the State Department of Education, which is a gigantic self-serving bureaucracy that is basically what the biggest source of problems here is. It isn't the teachers union, which doesn't really have any control. It really is the bureaucracy here in Cheyenne. So I just wanted to make that point that, yes, I came from Illinois. Illinois, same story that you have in Kansas.
Yeah.
Teachers unions run the show. There's nobody else that has any control. And Wyoming's different, and that gives us hope.
It does. We have a little more of a glimmer of hope than how difficult it is in Kansas, although, Don, you point out a great point. And it's really become the theme that's being teased out about the fight against the Common Core, this idea of bureaucracy versus everyone else. And we've seen it in Indiana, where Governor Pence, just 2 weeks ago, signed this bill saying no Common Core. And yet we see Dr. Sandra Stotsky was invited to Indiana to look at the new standards that they've been creating for the past year, because 2 years ago, Governor Pence said, we're getting out of the Common Core. You guys sit down, create a set of standards, and that's been a huge fight because the bureaucrats kept trying to get the Common Core in there, kept trying to put it in under different, just renaming it and putting in there. 2 weeks ago, Governor Pence signed this bill saying we're done. Dotted line, it's law, no Common Core. Dr. Stotsky released a confidential report that the Illinois Department of Education had that basically says 70% of these new non-Common Core standards are directly from the Common Core, verbatim, copied, and pasted, making a fool of their governor. The Indiana Department of Education making a fool of their governor. This theme is really being teased out. The fight to remove the Common Core is going to be a long one and a hard one.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, Amy, but this is sort of a segue to the science standards.
Yes.
The footnote that came out of the spending bill in the legislature recently, I don't know if you were on the conference call, the Board of Education conference call. I was on that, and I was astounded when a board member recommended, or I don't know if he put it in the form of a motion or what, but we have a footnote. We have state law now basically precludes the state board from reviewing the science standards or doing anything. Adopting them, yes. And so here's this board member saying, well, we ought to just go through with them anyway. And I was amazed because we have enough constitutional crises in Wyoming already. and so we do have a constitutional expert back here that could probably lend some insight on that. But I wanted to see if we could discuss that for a minute. And as well, I'd like to go into some of this low-hanging fruit that you mentioned, because we have an echo chamber here, and we need to do more than just complain to each other about how bad things are.
Yep.
We've got to go the next step and start doing some outreach. So, yeah.
Science standards, yeah. So you're right. The State Board of Education met after the legislative session, and what I think we were all hoping was going to happen was that they were going to gather their experts from the Department of Education, their experts on standards, and say, okay, folks, we can't do the next generation science standards. The legislature has said no. It's the law of the land here in Wyoming. What are we going to do next? That's not what happened. They gathered together in a teleconference. They included a lawyer from the AG's office, and they're trying to figure out how they can get around the law. That's just the bottom line. They're trying to decide if the budget footnote actually means that it's effective immediately, or if it means July 1 of this year. And if it means July 1 of this year, they're going to adopt those standards before July 1. So that's what they're trying to figure out right now with all of their attorneys. And that's where we're at with the science standards. Now, you also have to realize that the next generation science standards are being taught in some of our school districts. So here in Laramie County 1, at the high grades, they've already been adopted. They've been there for quite some time. I checked this early fall and just basically did a crosswalk of Laramie County 1, and they already had the standards. Natrona County didn't, and Campbell County does. So it just depends on the county. So the districts are already moving over to the next generation science standards, which the legislature has said no. So this is that whole kind of idea that bureaucracy versus the people, essentially.
Amy, one of the things that I noticed last session is I thought we worked hard to get things done, but sadly, we saw no parents there. I remember talking to firefighters, and I told them, don't just send your union representative, you all come down here. And they all came down, and they got their bill passed. But the privacy in education, the longitudinal data system, the science standards, chirp, chirp, out of the parents. We need groups and groups and groups to go down there. Last year with the gun issues in schools, some of the union members were there. They got that stopped. But I'm wondering if we had had the parents there, could we have done a better job in getting some of these things passed?
You know, I would agree with you in some sense, Lynn. We know that there's a lot of parents involved because we hear from them all the time. And you know, in Representative Reeder's bill, House Bill 97, we filled the House lobby with parents with buttons, and they were there for a day. Obviously, there's logistical issues with filling the legislature with parents. They're busy raising their children. They're busy working. It's hard to get them there and keep them there. But I also think that Mike hit on a point that I think is very different here in Wyoming. In states like Kansas or Illinois, they really know who the enemy is. I mean, they really understand that it's big and it's powerful. Here, we like to fight each other. because we just don't grasp how big the enemy is. That's a problem.
I just wanted to make a comment. I get the big picture of this, and I think I can articulate that pretty well. When we're talking about outreach to other people, though, what would be helpful for me as I try to talk to the individuals in my neighborhood and at swim practice and all the things I do with my kids, I want to be able to kind of dumb this down. I hate to use that term, but the truth is, if I talk to people about following the money and how it's all about big government and government control, they get this glossed look in their face because it doesn't matter, because they got to go get dinner and a swimsuit and everything else that they got to do. And so from an outreach perspective, I'm talking to parents just like me. I came in late, so I missed a lot of this, but just when you're talking about not having parent involvement in the classroom, that's so simple, but it's so tangible.
Yeah.
All the little things that are going on with this that are really specific to parents and kids and families, I want like 12 bullet points that I could, in my mind, know them and say, this is what's wrong with Common Core. Because when I talk about the big picture and government control and all that, people just get this glazed look, And so I think dumbing it down would be helpful, and it would, people have come to me because they know I'm kind of like a talk show junkie and all that kind of stuff, but so they want to get some answers, and I try to share, but I don't know those just basic things. So that's one thought. The other thing is, one thing that I think is challenging here is, I'm really blessed. My kids go to school here in town. I have two in elementary and one in junior high, and they have great teachers. They really do, and I feel really blessed because my sister just moved to Montana. They're farther advanced in Common Core. She left from Casper. Her sons were at Fort Casper, and she's called me crying almost. She's like, Luke, this is the worst thing ever. She said, you have no idea how good you have it in Wyoming until you leave. She said, it is horrible. And so, anyways, but my kids have great teachers. And so one of the challenges I see with this, though, is I feel kind of bad for the teachers, even though I'm against the union and all that stuff. But I kind of feel bad because they have really good teachers, and I see these teachers are going to be in between the rock and a hard place where they're going to see these kids and their needs. And look, they're good people. They want to do well at their job. They love their job, but it also feeds their family. So they know my kids have to pass this Pearson test or I lose my job. So I have to teach them the standards, even though little Johnny in the corner isn't getting it. And I wish I could spend a little more time helping him, but I can't because I've got to get the standards met, right? And so this is a real problem, and I think even outreach to teachers where they could kind of voice their opinion. Maybe they won't do it publicly. That's probably the part of the problem. But just the other day I saw the first national ad that I've ever seen on Common Core. Had 4 teachers on the TV, and I was shocked. But they did a great job, and they were talking right to the teachers, and hey, we're all going to be one community and learning the same stuff, and it's challenging. And so, anyways, that's my perspective from the outreach. Just kind of dumbing it down would be helpful for me.
Well, a couple of things, and thank you so much for that feedback. Like I said, we here kind of want to get out of the policy world and bring it down to the parent world. I would say there is a parent group, a really good one, Wyoming Citizens Opposing CommonCore.com. And they spend a lot of time, and they're parents. I mean, these are moms that you can talk to that have actually gone to PTA meetings, gulp, as scary as that's been from others, and presented to their fellow parents about the Common Core. So Wyoming Citizens Opposing CommonCore.com, they're a great resource for parents in the state you can kind of reach out to. There's several Wyoming Citizens Opposing Common Core Facebook pages. As far as teachers, well, first of all, the Montana issue, absolutely. In Wyoming right now, because we're not assessing the Common Core yet, we're not testing for it, we haven't seen the tipping point. We're not Montana yet. So teachers can still say, it's not that bad. It's okay. And your sister can say, wow, it's really better in Wyoming. Once the assessment comes online, we're going to be Montana and everyone else. And teachers are going to begin to step up. But even in that case, it's hard for teachers. It's hard. They're afraid.
Thank you very much for joining us. If you're watching on the live stream, we hope you'll continue your conversation.